Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really interesting and maybe kind of different take on weight loss.
Yeah, we're focusing on semaglutide, sure, but honestly, we're aiming way beyond just the medicine itself.
Exactly. This is more about, transforming that whole relationship you have with food and maybe even with yourself.
Our guides for this are two really insightful pieces. There's the Dan Hollis Semaglutide Manifesto
hmm
and another article, Weight Loss, What Dan Hollis Taught Me About Weight Loss.
And they really lay out this philosophy, right, that reframes weight loss. It's not just about a drug or gritting your teeth with willpower.
No, it's presented as this very human journey,
Mm.
discovering things, rebuilding things.
So our mission today is really to unpack that core idea for you. If you've ever felt like, willpower just wasn't cutting it,
Or maybe you've wondered, okay, what happens after the medication? What's the next step?
then yeah, this deep dive is definitely for you. We're going to talk about this idea of silence around food, what that means.
And also this concept of starting right, which sounds very different from just, starting over again.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where do we start with Hollis's view on semaglutide itself?
Well, first off, he really pushes back against seeing it as some kind of magic fix. That's key.
Right.
The manifesto says it clearly. This is not a drug journey. It's a human one. So it's a tool, a powerful one, that's still a tool.
Not just an easy button you press.
Exactly. It challenges that whole perception.
And it has this profound biological effect, doesn't it? It's not just about feeling less hungry.
No, it goes deeper. It actually changes how your brain is processing things like hunger, yes, but also satisfaction and even reward from food.
Which the manifesto calls both liberating and terrifying. That second one seems counterintuitive. Liberating, I get, but terrifying.
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting and very human. Think about it, for so many people, food isn't just sustenance. It's
Comfort, a coping thing.
precisely. It's a constant companion, maybe noise, maybe a way to handle feelings. Semaglutide, partly by working on those GLP-1 receptors and slowing stomach emptying, it quiets that down.
Ah, the food noise people talk about.
Right. The cravings lessen. That automatic reach for food when you're stressed or bored, it fades. And that space, that quiet, that's what Halls calls the silence.
So the silence isn't just physical lack of hunger, it's emotional quiet too. Removing that go-to coping mechanism.
Exactly. It can be really disorienting if food has always been your co-pilot, as the second source puts it. That constant comfort, that noise, it stops.
And that's when the real work starts.
That's the quote, yeah. The real work begins when the cravings stop. That's when the truth shows up. The truth about why you were eating, maybe, beyond just fuel.
Wow. Okay, so that leads straight into this whole willpower thing, doesn't it? We're all told just try harder.
Right. The classic advice.
But Hollis basically says, forget that. The manifesto flat out states, willpower was never the problem. How does that change things?
Well, it shifts the blame, doesn't it? Away from personal failing, from thinking you're just not disciplined enough.
Yeah.
Hollis argues willpower alone is kind of doomed long-term because it's fighting biology, emotion, and habit loops. Think about those automatic patterns like stressful day leads to raiding the fridge. That's not just willpower failing.
It's a whole system you're up against, not just a lack of character.
Exactly. And that emotion part is huge, the emotional weight.
People eating because they're anxious or lonely or bored.
Yes. Or feeling unsupported. Semaglutide can help with the biological hunger, sure, but the manifesto warns if you don't address that emotional piece, most people relapse.
So you need this emotional recalibration. What does that even look like in practice?
It means finding new ways, basically. New ways to handle stress without turning to food. Building connections if you're lonely. Finding other things for boredom. Maybe facing anxiety head on.
Breaking those automatic links between feeling something and eating something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other source adds a really interesting layer here. It says people often fail, not because the drug stopped working, but because no one helped them rewrite the rituals that defined their identity.
Rituals like social eating, celebrations, comfort routines.
All of that. So much of our identity and connection can be tied up in food rituals. You have to consciously rebuild those.
That's huge. It's not just about the drug. It's about what you do in that space it creates.
Yeah.
So if it's not about losing control, but losing connection, how do you rebuild that?
That's the shift in perspective. The second source says you didn't lose control. You lost connection. Connection to your body's actual hunger signals, maybe connection to your purpose, to yourself.
And the goal is to help you rebuild that.
Yes. And semaglutide,
Mhm.
in this view, is like a pause,
Mm.
a breather, a reset. It's not the permanent fix.
I like that framing, a pause. It creates what the source calls a sacred window.
A sacred window, yeah. A limited time, really, to consciously design a new way of operating, to build new habits that stick.
So the focus shifts away from just that number on the scale.
Totally. The scale. Well, the second source says it doesn't measure self-trust, which makes you ask, okay, what are we actually aiming for then?
And the answer seems to be this idea of alignment, right? You don't hold on to weight loss with discipline, you hold on to it with alignment.
Exactly. Shifting from that external struggle, discipline, to something more internal, integrated. Alignment. It just feels more sustainable.
Okay, so thinking long term, what about the pace of weight loss? Sometimes people want it fast.
Yeah, and Hollis warns against that. The manifesto calls fast weight loss a potential trap,
Why a trap?
because losing too quickly can actually slow your metabolism down. You can lose muscle mass, which you definitely don't want.
Yeah.
And paradoxically, your long-term results might actually be worse.
Because your body fights back against that rapid change.
Right. That's why they talk about metabolic pacing. Being intentional about timing, nutrition, habits, progress, focusing on keeping muscle, keeping your metabolism healthy. It's strategic.
It's definitely not a sprint then, more like a carefully planned marathon.
You got it. And this leads to maybe one of the most crucial points. The real work. It starts after the medication.
After. Okay.
Semaglutide isn't meant to be a forever thing for most people. So the manifesto is clear. Without a plan for what comes next, those old patterns, the appetite, the emotional triggers, they tend to come back.
So you have to build habits that can actually survive without the drug's direct effect.
That's the whole game. Build habits that can live beyond the injections. The other source really hammers this home too. If you don't plan for life after semaglutide, it will plan for you.
Wow, that's stark. It puts the responsibility but also the opportunity right back on you during that pause.
Absolutely. And this whole approach really starts by dismantling shame.
Yes, the manifesto says there is no shame here, only process.
I love that.
It's incredibly freeing, isn't it? It says straight up, you are not broken, you're not lazy, you're not undisciplined.
So what are you then, according to this view?
You're simply working against maybe a biology you weren't taught about and a culture that kind of profits from confusion and quick fixes. A culture that sets you up to fail, almost.
In some ways, yeah. So the job becomes resetting both things, your body and your expectations of yourself.
Yeah.
Understanding the real playing field.
It sounds less like getting a strict diet plan and more like a conversation, a partnership.
Exactly. The manifesto calls it a conversation, not just rules. It's about relationships with food, your body, the people helping you. It's a map, a guide, and a community.
Which leads to that final, really powerful reframing.
You're not starting over, you're starting right.
Starting right, meaning this time you're aligning with how your body and brain actually work, with support and without that crushing shame.
That's the idea. A truly fresh start, built on understanding, not just repetition.
It really transforms the whole picture. Weight loss becomes, well, the source calls it healing.
And healing, it says, isn't flashy. It's quiet. It's intentional. It's the slow layering of new choices, new thoughts, and new systems.
It's gradual internal work.
Yeah. And maybe the ultimate takeaway from Hollis, the thing we hope you consider, is that this isn't about trying to become some different person.
It's about part.
It's about finally having the space to become yourself.
Wow. So maybe the question for everyone listening is, what kind of space do you need? What internal noise needs quieting so you can align with your real goals, whatever they are?
A really provocative thought to end on.
Mm.
What does becoming yourself actually look like when the noise stops?